Hello and welcome back to the live series podcast brought to you by Amicus. This is the podcast that gives you insight into the life and role of tech leaders from all over the world. Today I'm joined by EJ Bensing, VP of Engineering over at Regal. Thank you for joining me, EJ. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. I realised that for me, it's a super chilled out Friday afternoon. Got a lovely conversation with you coming up, and then but you're in the glorious sun, and it's morning over there in Charlotte.
Yes, it is very much the beginning of my day here in Charlotte. I guess a little ahead of us on the way to the weekend.
Yeah, only slightly. I'm still just into the US, but since we started doing the
Mhm.
US market,
Mhm.
and chatting with people over there, and it still baffles me that the time difference. Maybe I'll never get used to it. Who knows? Um, so like I said, you're over at Regal. What's it like? What's it like? But do you want to also tell me a little bit about your career up to now, in case there's anyone out there that hasn't necessarily heard of Regal or yourself?
Yeah, so I'm at Regal.io now, VP of Engineering, head up the engineering team, and we are the kind of outbound phone and SMS sales solution that helps you drive incremental revenue. So we have a big focus towards B2C brands and help them drive conversations with their customers and both increase retention and revenue and just kind of all those fun metrics across the board. Um, Up until this point, prior to this, I was VP of engineering at a company called Mark 43, which does public safety tech. I It's pretty much my career. I joined Mark 43 back when it was the first three or so employees. As a software engineer and helped grow the company to over 100 enterprise customers by the time I left, over $1 billion valuation, and was VP of engineering. Took some time off and joined Regal last spring, and it's been an awesome time here. Really enjoying growing the team. Saw a lot of success last year, both tripled the size of the team and our revenue. So excited to go into 2023 and continue the journey.
I love that. You have such an upbeat manner about I hope that people that are listening and not watching do actually go and watch the video, because EJ is easily like the smiliest, friendliest, probably face that I've had so far on the podcast. It's lovely to see in the sunshine there. So let's talk about your experience with growing teams. I know you said that you tripled in growth, right? That's pretty extensive. Uh,
Yeah, about triple, yeah, a little over
yeah,
half.
yeah. So what I mean, it's a vague but also pretty like niche question. Like, how do you manage a culture within a team that's growing that fast or like that?
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting one, and certainly uh, it's something you have to be deliberate about. Basically, you can't just kind of let it happen. And especially, I think in today's world that's hybrid, you have team members who aren't all in the same spot. You really need to be investing both time and money into it. So, for us, that means things like quarterly on-sites or off-sites. So kind of getting everyone together, kind of bringing that together. It means setting core values and then kind of calling them out, so we have company core values and we have kind of engineering core values, and it's important to kind of continually be reinforcing those. You can't just put them out there and say, yep, do those. That's great. It needs to be part of, kind of part of your speaking style, part of your writing style, something as a leader that you constantly recognize in people. And kind of make an effort to incorporate it into the processes, right? So whether that's the promotion and review cycle or the career ladder, you really need to like keep those front and center, and kind of use those to promote again the culture that you want. And I think it's definitely important as a leader to make sure you are kind of actively recognizing these things, and actively calling out when people are doing the right things, because that's kind of what people will gravitate towards. You can't just it sometimes as a leader it's tempting to only call out kind of when you see something wrong and like go correct it, but there's also the kind of positive reinforcement side of it that I find is one of the kind of best bang for your buck as a leader. It doesn't take a ton of time or energy, but has a kind of outsized returns for developing the culture you want, and making sure that it stays in place as the team grows. You know, and I guess the last point I hit on there is needs to be in the hiring process too, right? If you don't have part of your hiring process to kind of find people who will not only help kind of reinforce your culture, but better it, then you're also kind of destined to fail. So, you know, got to keep in mind across the board.
Yeah, I love that. You kind of hit on a couple of points that I'd love to go over, to be fair. The first being, one of the first that you mentioned was kind of internal promotions, and how do you kind of go about that? Obviously, by the sounds of what you're saying, you do kind of prioritize those in terms of culture. How do you approach them overall? What's your attitude towards them?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I prefer to kind of promote somebody instead of hiring in for a position. That's generally my take for a variety of reasons. I think it just provides better results. Motivates people more, and in general has been something that has worked well in my career. And yeah, it's really about and when you're an early enough company, it's kind of ad hoc. But as you grow, making sure there is a kind of review process in place to make sure you're taking the time every 6 to 12 months to recognize those who kind of are at the next level. And then it's, for me, a combination of kind of looking at their impact, the person's impact, and kind of what their peers and their direct manager are saying about them. For me, I kind of value peer review a lot, because I feel that's really, if you have all of your peers gushing about you, and kind of really singing your praises, that generally means you're not just kind of putting on a face for the boss, so to speak. And so I value that pretty highly. Making sure you have a career ladder in place so that people know how to grow in their career, and kind of get that feedback, and they're not just kind of flailing in the wind. But kind of set those guardrails. Career ladders are a guide, not a checklist, though. The promotion process isn't meant to have people run down that ladder, check things off, and say, "Yep, he hit it, she hit it. Let's promote him." It's a discussion. It's talking about kind of where the individual may be, either further along on the ladder on a certain axis, farther behind, but is their net impact at that level? And then, the best part is actually promoting people. Getting them that promotion, getting that compensation change, and seeing them kind of grow in their careers. That's one of the reasons why I'm in management, is because that is one of the things I enjoy most, is helping people kind of like grow in their careers and improve.
I love that as well. I think one of the most interesting things you said there was about peer reviews, and it's such a simple kind of idea, or a reason, I should say, behind doing that, is that they're just not putting a face on for the boss, right? And they just want to, you're getting a real insight into their attitude towards pretty much everything within the company, right? If the peers are seeing it, it's most likely they're seeing like a huge chunk of this employee that you're never really seeing, which is super smart. And also, I think when you've got kind of peers reviewing each other, it can give each other confidence, especially if there's a lot of obviously positive feedback. But even when there's negative feedback, I feel like when it comes from a peer, you kind of, for lack of a better phrase, feel like you're getting less of a telling off almost with it, and you feel like, and it's going to boost your confidence regardless, in my opinion. And then obviously confidence in turn can produce some really great work, and can motivate a lot of people. So I think overall that's a super interesting point. The second thing that you mentioned in your last answer that I really wanted to touch on was your hiring process. You obviously mentioned looking and spotting for particular things that are going to benefit your culture overall. And I talk a lot on this podcast with people about spotting the right kind of culture fit at that initial stage of the process. Just talk me through what your hiring process looks like at the moment, and what's kind of the evolution of that hiring process as a team gets bigger as well? Does it change?
Yeah, so I can give you an overview real quick of our current hiring process. It does vary per role. We do kind of tailor the process to a given role, but it does have some rough outlines. So generally the first part is a screen with our recruiters. So we do have, fortunate enough to have in-house recruiters at this point. And so they do kind of initial intake call, get the basics down, give the candidates some information about Regal, that kind of thing. And then from there, it can go a number of directions, but generally speaking, it moves to kind of a brief technical screen for the more junior roles, just to kind of confirm. It's kind of like the FizzBuzz type thing. Can you write some code? Can you do a really easy problem, just to kind of sanity check things, and then it'll move into the what we call these days the panel round, the on-site, that kind of thing. It's 2 1-hour technical interviews. One is always a system design question, and then that's kind of like whiteboarding, figuring out like design the system. What trade-offs would you make, that kind of thing. The other is a coding exercise, and that again kind of varies heavily depending on which role it is. We try and it's kind of one thing that I'm pretty passionate about, is making sure that the coding exercises in interviews are somewhat relevant to the things that you're actually going to be doing for your job. I think that's a common pitfall in interview processes, is just asking some algorithms question that's about an algorithm that you maybe learned in class 10 years ago, that you will never use, like unless the job happens to be like algorithms.us or something, just really inapplicable to your day-to-day. So we really try and focus our coding interviews in on, again, it's like a pair coding exercise sometimes. Sometimes it's more of a debuggy code type thing, but it's something that, again, I think reflects better on what your actual kind of day-to-day job will be. And then from there, generally speaking, the more junior candidates will go do a kind of values interview with Rebecca, who's one of Regal's co-founders. And we kind of do a huddle and make a hiring call from there. More senior candidates will tend to skip kind of that initial FizzBuzz question, because generally speaking, people with 8-9 years experience plus should probably be able to code. And instead, we'll often replace that with an interview with me. So I'll do an initial screen to kind of talk through, generally not just kind of like, have you explain a project that you've done type thing, but also dig into kind of your technical leadership abilities. Because I think that's, more senior roles, I'm expecting much more of a leadership capacity in them than just kind of like sitting there coding type thing. But then from there, it's kind of very similar to the kind of more junior roles, that kind of on-site panel round with two interviews. We use the same interviews across both of those, and it's generally kind of how well you do on any given one levels you throughout the process. And then kind of always the final round is with Rebecca, which we can still do now, which is nice. At some point that won't scale, and that's kind of always an interesting point in a company's life cycle. But I think it's great that we're still kind of like at the point where she can do that. We can have, co-founders really are the ones who set the culture. So have them on the panel really, I think helps drive that home and make sure that we are kind of finding folks who do kind of bring the company up, both from a contribution standpoint and from a kind of cultural standpoint.
Yeah, it does mean a lot as well, I think, probably to a candidate who sees that a co-founder still, cares essentially, and is still like, not that they wouldn't care about a company that they co-founded, but I think you see what I'm saying. It's more the general kind of picture that sets, so that the company is literally from the top down, thought through and cared about from the people at the top, and it doesn't give a corporate impression. And I think that's really important, especially for like you said, kind of a more sort of junior position as well. They feel like they can kind of connect a little bit better to the people at the top, and I think that is something that's really important in a new role. You mentioned there as well, you are wonderfully segueing me, but it's like I've got the questions next to you or something, like you are just like segueing me perfectly into each one. So the next one that I did want to talk about, which you mentioned, was kind of certain pitfalls in hiring processes. Just kind of like talk me through any common ones that you've seen flag up. It's something that we talk about a little bit on this podcast, and it varies sometimes you get crossover, so I just kind of want your perspective on those.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably the number one pitfall is people thinking their interview process is better than it is. And you really need to be cognizant, I think, of the fact that interviews by almost design are imperfect measurements. So keeping that in mind, I think, should be at the core of how you approach hiring. Because, there's no way someone can kind of, give their entire experience in 3 hours worth of interviews. That's just not how, especially more senior candidates, not how that works. So keeping that in mind, I think, is very important, because that'll let you add a human element to your hiring process, especially at a younger startup. If you're Google, like, it needs to be like there's probably very little human involved. It's like there's a bunch of check boxes that need to get hit, a bunch of committees, all that. To start up, like I can like make decisions, like Rebecca can make decisions, like we can look at each candidate, talk to each candidate. So making sure that you're kind of not being too rigid, I think, is one thing. Another thing is what I touched on earlier. Make sure you're actually testing what is relevant. Don't just put an algorithms interview in there because you heard Google does an algorithms interview. Like that's not, I think, particularly useful, insightful. I'm really trying to gain something out of each interview, and gain kind of knowledge that they can do something that would be relevant. I think that both gives you better signal, and it's a better experience for the candidate. I do not think in my 9+ years of professional experience, I've ever heard anybody say, "Wow, I loved that algorithms interview. That was just so much fun." Like that's never happened. And instead it's been the opposite. I've heard people just not do interview processes, not interview with the company, because like, why would I want to work at a company that still does something like that? So keeping that in mind, like, make sure you're again, if your product does involve a bunch of like algorithms and whatnot, and really get in the weeds on things like that, then sure, okay, that makes sense. But I would wager that 99 out of 100 companies out there today, that's just not the case. So keeping that in mind. And then finally, I think there's something to be said for making sure that you do trust your gut in hiring decisions. There, as I said, it is an imperfect process. So making sure that you add kind of your own experiences to that, even if kind of some signals are pointing the other way, like is I think a big part in having a successful process. Because these are you're dealing with imperfect information, so sometimes you just gotta go with what your experience is telling you will or won't work. So those are some of the big ones that I see or have seen in interview processes that I've designed and run and all of that. But yeah, it's something you need to constantly be looking at as you grow the company as well. Like, interview processes should remain static over years. Need to be updated. Gather feedback from candidates, both ones that you do give offers to and don't, and be looking at that as a way to evangelize the company, not just hire people.
Yeah, that's wicked. I think definitely keeping it fresh in tech, like how anyone would expect to survive without constantly reviewing their hiring process. I don't understand. I think obviously because I come from obviously a marketing background, and I think when I'm kind of hearing the conversations around in the office at Amicus, and we're talking to candidates looking to enter a role, and the amount of different versions of hiring processes in tech, is something that astounded me when I first kind of entered this kind of environment, because it's essentially probably, I would say, the top at least one or two industries in the world that requires constant progression and moving forward, and that trickles down into every single aspect of a career in tech. And I think the hiring process is probably one of the most important bits of that needs to stay super fresh and definitely reviewed a lot. And I love that you said that. I love that you said follow your gut as well, because I think that's just not really considered often enough. And there's the, as I think, again, the recruiters in our office, you kind of, you need to be more kind of objective than that. But I think when you're already at the company, so from maybe our client's perspective, they're the ones who can trust their gut, and they're the ones ultimately whose opinion really matters, and they're ultimately the people that have to work with them again at the end of the day. So I really love that you said that. So we've kind of gone over a little bit about the perspective of yourself and kind of how you can help others, and just basically how people in your position can improve the way that they're going through things at the moment. But in terms of looking for candidates, what are some red flags in terms of when you're hiring? And from a candidate's perspective, what should they be? Or if you're a junior, or if you're a senior, or whatever kind of level you're at, what are some kind of basic or not so basic red flags that you could avoid?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I'd say, it certainly varies, but a couple that just come to mind. One I'd say, and this is especially true for more senior candidates, is being too dogmatic. I think as you go through your career, you'll recognize that there's not just one way to do things, and it's pretty rare that there's even one best way to do things. And sometimes you find more senior candidates get stuck in a hole of, no, it's like this technology, this is the best, we must use this. And it's not even like they're willing to discuss it even more. It's just kind of like, nope, this is like my religion almost. So making sure people have that kind of open mind and ability to look at the trade-offs in any given situation, because it's again rare that two are the exact same, is very important. So that's certainly something that I look for when I'm talking to candidates, especially kind of in my interviews, is that ability to be pragmatic. Other ones I'd say, people, it is kind of along the same lines. You ask, what's a technology decision that you've regretted making? If you say nothing, or like I can't think of one, like nobody doesn't regret anything they've built. I've built many systems, had many regrets, and they're good learning opportunities. So anybody who can't again reflect like that, I think it's about introspection. Again, red flag for either they haven't been exposed to the consequences of some of the design decisions they've made, or they're just not very thoughtful. And finally, I'd say anybody who doesn't have a good reason for kind of why they're interviewing with us, or like where they want to work, like kind of what they're looking for in a position. And it almost doesn't matter what the reason is, as long as you can like articulate it and like have conviction about it. But people are too wishy-washy on that, end up being difficult to close in the hiring process, and in general not the motivation just isn't there, even if you do end up hiring them. So those kind of three things that I generally look at or have come across, but there's obviously many more that pop up here and there.
Yeah, I really love the point that you made about just being introspective and showing that you're a little thoughtful about your work. I think one of my recent guests was Andre Perizzato, and he kind of said that he prefers to ask negative questions over positive questions for that exact reason of, like, you can say like, why do you like Golang, and they'll kind of reel off the top 5 like Googled answers. Whereas if you say like, why wouldn't Golang work in this sort of situation, then they really open up about their experience, and even they could have an example of when it's not worked for them or anything specific, and you instantly get a much bigger answer in terms of what they actually know about the language, in terms of knowledge, but also about their experience as well. And it kind of brings up your point of being introspective and learning from that, and learning from their own experiences and how it's going to essentially help you and your company. I think that's a really great point. So in terms of hiring again, let's talk standards. Like where I was nearly said, where are you at with them? Presumably you've got really great standards over at Regal, but how do you implement them? How do you maintain them? Do you review them? Like, just talk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of hiring standards, yeah, I mean, obviously it can be a tricky question, especially if you're trying to grow fast. But I think the general gist is you shouldn't ever really fundamentally lower them, even if you are trying to grow fast. Like sometimes it can be tempting to just get bodies in the seat, but that tends to not work out well. So you really got to be conscious about it, and you know, forming standards is it's difficult because it's hard to you know, kind of like teach that per se. So in general, I rely a lot on the interviewers and their experience at the company, you know, at Regal, and kind of their knowledge of like what our different standards are, you know, that they've developed over time, the kind of sense, the subjective part of their experience, you know, to do that. You know, for example, if I'm interviewing a front end candidate for a senior position, I often want you know, one of my, you know, staff front end engineers or something to be on that interview panel, and I can ask them, you know, hey, is this candidate, you know, what level are they technically? And someone like that should be able to do the mapping between kind of like our levels, our, you know, kind of standards and where they're at, because they've worked at the company, they've reached that level of seniority, they've seen it before. But it's not something you can just like, you know, make a checklist on. So it does end up being a lot of kind of trusting in your interviewers, which is why training them is important. Getting them like reps on the interview process is important. You know, there's a lot of times, you know, you end up, you do enough interviews and you're like, okay, well, this was a really good interview because I know kind of where on the spectrum people can fall. You know, so it's difficult. Yeah, I always find it hard when I'm giving a new interview for the first time, to know like, well, did they knock it out of the park, or like, is this like a just middle of the road, or is this like a really bad one? Because you just don't have any measurement points against it. And then, yeah, I mean, looking at overall, you know, success rate in terms of like, once you hire someone, like, do they, you know, do they end up being the correct level that you were expecting? And do they kind of work out, you know, if you're seeing too much, if either, you know, people who aren't a right fit, and need to exit, or people who just like aren't as strong technically as you were expecting, that generally means somewhere in your interview process there's a problem, and you need to go dig in and figure out what needs to be adjusted, whether that's the question, the interviewers, you know, the speed of the interview process. I mean, there's a number of levers that you can pull there. You know, are you missing something? Is there an interview that you're missing that you should be adding? That kind of thing. But it involves basically just kind of constant reflection, and looking at the results of kind of your hiring process, which, yes, is a lagging indicator, but it's kind of been the most effective one that I've seen.
Yeah, I like that. You seem like you are someone who's obviously like pretty self-aware in terms of like yourself as a leader. You mentioned a lot about reflecting on things, which I absolutely love. I think that's for me, that's definitely a sign of a good leader. I think, and it brings me again nicely into my next point. As a tech team's growing, the obvious kind of change for you would probably be that you are essentially managing more people. As that happens, what is kind of going on in your head for you in yourself? And what I mean by that is, how necessary is it, or how often is necessary to self-reflect and to review your own performance as a leader? And how do you kind of go about measuring it? Or is it just kind of like a pep talk when things get stressful, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, my general rule of thumb is about every time your org doubles, you need to change both how you as a leader are operating, and probably how the org operates. Whether that's going from, 2 to 4 engineers, or 4 to 8, or 8 to 16, kind of like each of the, like, and then keep going. Each of those generally necessitates a different mode of operation, again, both for you, as a leader, and for the organization as a whole. And so kind of being, so sometimes you get kind of lost in the weeds, and you forget, oh yeah, I mean, we put this in place when we were at 10 people and we just crossed 20. So maybe we should be thinking about how we're doing this. It does take a little bit of kind of reflection, obviously, to remember when kind of certain things happened. But it's important. And then in terms of kind of gauging how well you're doing, I think in a lot of cases, there's two things that I would look at. And the first is kind of the output of the engineering work, basically. Like, are they operating efficiently? Are they able to do their jobs kind of well? Do they have the right support? Do they have the right tools, that kind of thing, the right kind of leaders in place, not just myself, but kind of below me. And finally, kind of the other metric that I look at is basically like employee NPS, eNPS. If your team is overall not happy, then chances are you as a leader are doing something wrong. Because that's one of your jobs as a leader, is to make sure that people are motivated, and engaged, and unhappy people aren't either of those. So eNPS happens to be, I think, a decent metric for kind of getting a rough barometer of that, at scale. When you're 10 people, just talk to people. Like, you can go have a one-on-one with everyone on your team, and it's not going to take you. You can do that in a week. If you're 40 people, okay, doing a half-hour one-on-one with everybody on your team is both going to exhaust you, and it's going to be very hard to like take action off of it. So something like eNPS is incredibly valuable. But I think those are kind of the two big things that I look at as like, myself and a leader. And kind of how do I measure like how I'm doing is like, are the people who work in my org happy and feel they're like engaged and progressing? And are we getting results? Like, are we delivering against our roadmap? Are we delivering value to our customers? Are we doing what the rest of the company needs us to do in terms of kind of building and supporting the product? Because I mean, you can have the happiest org on the planet, and if you're not doing that, then doesn't mean about not doing a great job as a leader. Flip side, you can be doing that if your org's miserable, like also not going to have people staying long, and generally just not creating kind of the culture or the environment that I think promotes a sustainable company.
I love that. I really love that. I'm glad that you kind of extended that a little bit as well, because I was going to ask how you actually go around asking, like, do you just wander up to a team member and be like, do you think I'm good at my job, or is this, I don't know, like, it's but I like that you even considering different sizes of teams as well. And you're right, it's for a practical reason, but also, it's with that many kind of, if like you said, it was 40, I think half an hour for someone doesn't feel like a big massive commitment, but for one person, and to have 40 half an hours, that is very draining, and by the end of it, you'll probably just be asking them to tell you that you're great and then leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so insightful. EJ, I've got kind of two questions left that I do ask in every episode. And the penultimate one that I'm going to ask is in 3 words. How do you think your team or teams would describe you as a leader?
Well, I guess I would hope they describe me as thoughtful, transparent, and direct. I think are the 3 that I would go with.
I like that.
Yeah, I hope.
I know I can always get that response of, well, I hope they're going to stay. And I've never actually had someone say, they'll probably tell me that I'm not very good. But yeah, that's brilliant. I don't think I've had anyone say any of those 3 yet, actually, which is really nice, because I think definitely thoughtful. You definitely get that impression from you that's a big driver for you, which, in my opinion, is a massive deal in a leader. I think in any industry. Literally anywhere, thoughtfulness is super valued. People want to feel considered, and they want to feel like, well, valued. And it's very, very important. So my last question, EJ, is ultimately what kind of advice would you have for tech professionals looking to be where you are today?
Yeah, I'd say probably the number one thing is always be trying to do more and kind of just go do it. Don't wait for someone to hand it to you. I think that's kind of been a lot of how I got to where I am today is I was at a growing company and I just started doing stuff that I saw needed doing. I didn't wait for my boss to tell me what to do. I didn't wait to be given the official blessing to do it. Just go get it done, and if you do it reasonably well, people start noticing. And I think that's kind of another thing I would say is, if you want to accelerate your career, go join a startup. Your growth curve, will just be much higher there. I think it can be good to get some experience at more established companies, give you a baseline. And you can, but I'm going to guess that it takes people decades to get to kind of the level I'm at in somewhere like Google versus going to startup. So I think being okay with some of that growth and that ambiguity that comes with startup life can be hugely impactful in your career. And finally, I'd say, be consistently working towards kind of the company's success. Don't be looking at it as like, I'm going to try and do what's best for me and get as far as I can. Because people do notice that. And oftentimes it causes you to make decisions that aren't optimal and end up frustrating people like me. But those when you see folks who are truly kind of doing their best with kind of the aim of lifting everybody up, it speaks volumes. Ends up resulting in better work. I think it honestly makes you happier. And it's something that I would encourage folks to do is look at the bigger picture. I guess that's really kind of what it boils down to is don't be so myopic as to only consider kind of where you need to go. Be thinking about kind of how to take everything else into account, because again, that results in better decisions. And it's something that you have to do as you get more senior. You can't just be thinking about where your org goes or that kind of thing, because again, it results in suboptimal decisions and results.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. The bit that stood out to me when you said it there was as long as your aim is to lift everyone up, things will happen for you, and I really love that point.